Okay, so let me quickly ask you guys to do a quick round of introductions. I mean, obviously, I introduced you all. We'll start this way. Please go ahead.
So I'm very, very happy to be here. You know, so now almost 30 years I'm trying to push action on climate. And you know, preparing COP21, I rely a lot on your profession to make government aware of the risk and aware of the necessity to really be serious about mitigation this risk, as well as considering that anyway, the cost of inaction are much higher than the cost of action. And who more than you can express that truth? And again, unfortunately, sometimes they don't listen to you enough. And so I'm so happy that I heard at COP30, and if I can do anything in my now new role of special envoy from the Brazilian government to Europe, to make insurance a key element of the outcome of COP30. We need to wake up, and we need to consider that the information, your evaluation, your scenario, your vision of the future has to inform governments. You know, climate denial doesn't prevent that climate to happen. So what is rational to close how high? So that's why I do think we need a new social compact around understanding the risk, investing in a new area, and effectively not oppose adaptation and resilience to mitigation because it's just short-sighted. So I am here because I want your help to do the best of we have at Belém in COP, which is probably the most important COP since Paris. We need really to relaunch climate action in difficult geopolitical times, and so that's why I'm so happy to be there. And at the same time, you are big investors. You are not only people who manage and frame risk, but you are as well investors. And it's important what you do with your assets. And if you go into really what we hope for, decarbonizing your portfolio asset, investing in the right decision making, you would bring a lot to the financial market as well. Each time I talk to central bankers, they say, we need the insurers to inform ourselves on the financial stability risk we are running because of climate change. So your role both on the economics and of course the societal aspect of that is key. So I do think that you have on one side to speak louder, really frankly, we need you, and at the same time really to reconsider your asset management that has to be consistent with your own evaluation of the risk. And I think sometimes some of your colleagues have lost as much money on the insurance of risk as well as the money you earn on a heavy carbonized portfolio. So that's my two demands to you today.
Okay, thank you so much. Chris, over to you for a quick introduction.
Thank you, yeah. So a big thank you to Insurance Europe for inviting me to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here, particularly in the company of this panel. So just quickly by way of background, I'm Chris. For many years, I worked for Pool Reinsurance, which is the UK public-private partnership for reinsuring systemic terrorism risk. Included in that time now, I also spent some time with the Australian pool, the equivalent of Pool Re, and some time with the UK government in the Department for Business and Trade, working on resilience and Lloyd's market initiatives. So terrorism is not climate risk. There's a lot of big differences. But I think there's a lot of overlap in the way that governments and private sector need to work together to basically address these risks that we've been talking about that are either uninsurable for whatever reason or for which there's a large protection gap. So I was in the inside of one of these pools for a long time, decided I need to see it from another angle, and so joined Guy Carpenter at the end of last year. Guy Carpenter's a reinsurance broker, so very basically we connect insurance companies, governments, risk pools with the international reinsurance market. We put about 60 billion of premium into the market each year doing that. I work on public sector, so initiatives in UK and Europe, and because we're part of the Marsh McLennan family, we are basically able to offer a full service to governments and risk pools. So we can introduce new schemes, we can provide modeling and risk analytics, we can work with them on their claims and risk management strategies, and of course we can transfer their risks to the global reinsurance and capital markets. So hoping to be able to touch on some or all of those in the conversation.
Definitely, and you seem to have a very interesting portfolio going from terrorism to thinking about climate change. Brilliant. Elina, over to you.
Thanks so much, Mariam. And like others have said, it's a real pleasure to be here. Important moment. It's also an important time for the Commission. The European Commission has been really putting climate risk preparedness and risk management into focus, because we have realized that actually maybe it's too optimistic, the title, Rising Storm, because we're actually in the middle of a storm already. When we look at what's happening around us, it's nothing short of tragic. And that requires a real effective policy response. And that is something that our President has very clearly put forward as a top priority for this Commission. In her political guidelines that date to July, she called for this adaptation plan, but she clearly also said that she wasn't going to be looking at it from environment perspective only, but it is a matter of energy, infrastructure, agriculture, housing. All sectors of economy are impacted. Macro-fiscal balance is being disturbed by the eventualities that we're seeing around us. And for the Commission, we can't afford to pay for the damages, and we cannot afford to invest European taxpayers' money in a way that gets it exposed to the climate risk. It's as simple as that. So we've been already working with Insurance Europe, EIOPA, ECB, EIB, to bring together a community of practitioners beyond environmentalists, beyond ministries of environment, to rehearse concepts and language that would resonate across the different partners in the society. Because it is blatantly clear that science has not kept up with reality. Scientists are very conservative in doing their reporting, but what reality shows us, and this was also in the State of Environment report, the latest one that looked at 2024, is that globally we have overshot 1.5 degrees. We hope that's temporary. We hope that it's as a result of El Niño and El Niña and the different weather patterns, but it may not be. So as policymaker, I'm obliged to apply precautionary principle. If the probability is there, we need to be ready. And that's where the adaptation plan and the different baselines that we're going to be putting forward next year with my team kick in. Because we want to really change mindsets and approaches in whole of the economy, whole of the society, so that we have the possibility and ability to withstand the climatic conditions and realities that are there. And there is no space for complacency, but there is also no space for defeatism. Because if we resign from this challenge, then the consequences will be nothing short of catastrophic. And I, for one, share Commissioner's view. We are capable, we can, and we will rise to the challenge. If the humanity has one thing, it has the ability to innovate and survive. So we'll do that.
Nicely said. Now, Dyogo, of course, you've already spoken, so I'm going to kick off with the questions. And then, audience, who's put questions into the app, please go ahead and start doing that now, because we're talking about, a whole variety of issues, and this is such an important topic for your sector. And coming to that, Laurence, I'm going to start with you first, simply because, as chief architect of the Paris Agreement, people like you and people that care about the climate. I mean, obviously, we've got these climate detractors in the world. I mean, you've spoken about it before. If we keep denying it, how are we actually going to fix the problems? Because the problems that we have with the climate won't go away. But one thing that happened, the Californian wildfires, do you feel as if this was finally a wake-up call? Because it affected a certain part of the population that have wealth. And so that could possibly be a wake-up call, but at the same time, when you look at the US, you've got, and he keeps infecting all of our conversations, sorry to all the Americans in the room, and any Trump supporters, but we've got this US president who has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accords. He's revoked a whole host of former Biden policies when it comes to the climate. And his new energy policies or executive orders, declare a national energy emergency where he's expanding oil and gas drilling. I mean, when we're looking at the sort of direction of really the engine of the world, the US, when it comes to climate policy, where are we headed when we have such a massive wake-up call, such as, you know, the Californian wildfires?
So it's a bit a contradiction in a way. That's not the first time US decided to withdraw for any international mechanism on climate. We had Kyoto Protocol first, and then we have the first Trump withdrawal, and then the third one. So in a way, we have US back and forth for many years. So that's why it's a problem, because it's the second emitter at world level, and of course a big economic power. But at the same time, I don't see, and I'm quite optimistic on the capacity of COP30 to say, okay, US doesn't want to go there, but we will go there. And inside US, I was reading the Financial Times this morning, where you see that investment in fossil fuel are going down, low prices, by the way, and Texas companies that want to stick to renewable energy because that's the way they are earning their money now. So the contradiction in US society may continue to appear. And I remember when Trump won, during Trump won, the reason of a closure of coal power plant was much quicker than when Obama, the last Obama mandate. So it's really a problem because there is, in a way, retaliation potentially. The science in US is destroyed progressively on climate, and that has an effect on us. But look, 25% of cars sold last year, electric cars, so 25 of the global sales of cars were in 2024, and that will be the same in 2025, 25% electric. Batteries cost 90% less. Solar panel, as you know. So the real economy is pointing in that direction. If the US want to withdraw, well, let's see what happened to them. I see in Brazil a number of really economic sector, very dynamic in having the green economy in Brazil, of course, with all the difficulties anybody can have. So the Chinese emission probably has peaked and probably can decrease by 20 or 30%. Of course, then there are the politics to announce that or not. So I think there is an element of the reality of the technological revolution and the awareness. Do California? Well, California, if in a way the federal government don't prevent California to be more serious about climate risk, I think they will continue their decarbonization plans. But at the same time, well, they should not allow the people to just build their house in the same condition with the same technology. That's where your sector has to be, in a way, produce a warning call. We cannot ensure anymore, and that's true in California, that's true in Florida, and that's true in now a number of countries in Europe. So that's why, again, you need to speak louder, because it's so easy to say, we don't want to know. This will not happen again. It will happen again more and more. So just, again, the call to action for me, is super important. I really count on you. I count on you before Paris, and that was very important. You asked for a global agreement just to manage that risk you identify so well.
Dyogo, I'm going to come to you, given that Brazil is, of course, set to host COP30. I mean, are you sort of building in, you know, what America could do or won't do into the summit itself?
Well, of course, the Brazilian government is making a great effort about all the negotiations. I'm really concerned about it. I don't see the mitigation agenda moving very forward in this COP30. But for the bright side, I see the adaptation agenda and the resilience agenda moving faster than the other. So what we are doing, we've been in touch of several government officials in Brazil, and most of them are telling us that they will focus on the adaptation agenda. There is a big interest on that because, like Elina said, the scientists, they are too conservative, so they lied to us. They said the climate change would happen. The fact is that it has already happened, and we are in the middle of the first stage of the climate change. And now I think that the society needs to prepare to live with this for a long period of time. And so there's much things to be done to reduce risks. There is a long agenda of prevention, and there is a long agenda of resilience and rebuilding. And I do believe that in this COP30, this will be the agenda that we will move forward. And yes, I do believe that, of course, the insurance sector has an important role on that. And I do believe that this is not only by managing risk, accepting risk, pricing risks, it's also as consultants of the government, we have a lot to say to the government, how to build, how to change the constructions codes, how to improve the infrastructure, how to prepare people, how to prepare business to live in these different conditions. And I do believe that we have an important role as investors as well. In Brazil, but in this we have to take very care about the regulations. I saw all the discussions about Solvency II, but things a little bit different from theory to reality. So what you have in Brazil, for example, our investments are mainly almost 95% of the investments are on public bonds. So, and when I look to solvency, I see that if the insurers move from that to, like, for example, sustainable projects or bonds, there will be a penalty for higher market risk, higher credit risk. So this is a very important discussion. The other discussion is how the climate risk impacts the capital requirements of the insurers. So the higher the risk in the budgets, in the portfolios of the insurers, the higher the capital requirements. So is there going to be a penalty for that or not? So there are very important issues to discuss on that.
Well, let's bring in Chris for that one then. I mean, obviously, you know, just picking up on what Dyogo was talking about, also especially given your background, as you said, in terrorism, insuring terrorism. When we look at the losses that the insurance market had for the Californian wildfires, it was $12 billion of claims so far. So how can, you know, how can insurers do better? How can you provide for, you know, provide for yourselves as well better? Because as Dyogo was saying, you know, you have a massive role to play when it comes to natural catastrophes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is just picking up on the fundamental point that's been made all day about that really important relationship between reducing the underlying risk, insurability, and affordability. So I think the point was made by Thierry right at the beginning that, you know, insurers and reinsurers have reinvented themselves many times and will continue to do so. They are, you know, resilient and you know, in almost all cases, you know, weathering the storm. But I think if we're talking about how they are adapting to the climate risks, I think we can come on to some real positives. You know, I'd like to talk about risk pools, there's community-based catastrophe insurance, there's parametric triggers, but we do need to start with the acknowledgement that from a consumer point of view, affordability is broadly going in the wrong direction. So I think we heard the commissioners say that in Europe it's a quarter of losses covered. In the US, I think since, or notwithstanding the fact that you know, insurers are sort of withdrawing from some states altogether. In Australia, I think it's important to sort of say, you know, just give that global view that, you know, 15% of households pay a month's combined salary for their annual policy. Like, that's the level of affordability that they are required to meet to sort of insure their house.
No, that is a lot.
That is a lot.
That is a lot,
but you know, and there's no point I think Thierry made this point as well. There's no point maligning insurers for this. They are pricing what they are seeing. So they are sending economic signals about the level of risk that they're seeing, and they're needing to put up premiums or tighten their terms and conditions or withdraw cover altogether. So I think, you know, it's a slight reframing sometimes of an insurability crisis to it being a risk crisis. Affordability reflects that. So it's, I suppose risk is fundamentally the hazard, so in this case, the rising temperature, times by the exposure, so where the assets are, and their vulnerability, so how they're constructed. And arguably, all three of those things are going in the wrong direction. And insurance will continue to adapt, but it is fundamentally about reducing that level of risk in the first place. I personally believe that public-private partnerships have a big part to play in that, but they are by no means the only answer. They are part of the way that governments and insurers can work better to do that, to essentially build in adaptation.
Yeah, go ahead, Lina.
I would like to pick up from
Yeah,
Chris,
exactly.
'cause something that we have been working on a lot, not just on our own, but together with our partners, is a concept of resilience by design, climate resilience by design, so that from any and every project development, from the outset, you start factoring in climate considerations. So how is a electricity grid going to be able to withstand storms that are of different strength that they were 10 years ago? How are we going to be able to adapt our crops that we, farm to be able to withstand the droughts or the floods and still provide a yield to our farmers? And this is something that has to happen everywhere across. And I'm not saying that Europe, every country is feeling the risks at the same level, but we do need to have a common understanding of the temperature reality in which we're going to be living, doing business, and bringing up our children in 5 to 10 years' time. And that's one of our objectives, is to provide that awareness in the economy and somehow condition action across sectors on factoring in the risk considerations. So this resilience by design, preparedness by design, it has to be a new way of approaching a new philosophy by default for all kinds of activities. And if you look at the competitiveness compass that came forward from the Commission as one of the 100-day deliverables, resilience by design is mentioned. If you look at the next multi-annual financial perspectives, it puts a lot of accent on that type of readiness to consider what is going to be the climatic reality in which our policies need to operate. Because when we commissioned a big report, which was delivered last year. It was the first ever European climate risk assessment. So it looked at all the sectors, the exposures, and also the policy readiness. So we discovered that many of the 37 risks that were examined were already at very, very high level. Not catastrophic, not extreme, but at a level that requires policy action. We also discovered that our policies are not keeping pace with climate reality. So we really need to future-proof our thinking and be ready to look at our sector policies in order to ensure that they are impactful and they can operate and have the desired influence on our society in the new type of climate reality, because we can do a lot. There's a lot of tools, there's a lot of know-how, not least in the insurance sector, but it has to become decision relevant. So we have to be able to feed it to the policymakers at different levels of governance so that they can then build that resilience that makes businesses and houses and property insurable. So it's kind of a win-win. By sending the right signals, we can create a positive kind of consensus and understanding that allow us to become more prepared and more resilient as whole of the society.
But do you think that society at large, so the everyday person, do you think that they understand all of this risk as well? I mean, how are you communicating that message to them?
I think it's really important to communicate it in a way that doesn't overwhelm people, that they don't feel that this is all too big. It's all too, like the Commissioner was saying, that we're just being toyed with by the cards. That's not how it is. So we need to be able to, as regulators, show that we're not going to be sitting our hands, that we're going to stand up to this challenge and we're ready to do something. And I think the conversation that I saw around the release of the risk assessment, and also we did a communication on managing climate risks. And it was not so much about the planet. It was managing climate risks, protecting our people and prosperity, because that's what it ultimately is about. The planet will go on, but how do we prosper and compete and work in that? That's for us to decide by our choices and by the choices that we inform our public to make as consumers, as producers, and as citizen of not just Europe, but I think this is something that I'd like to also have as a conversation internationally. And I think the COP may be just a very good venue to raise that awareness, not in a way of despair, but a way of, okay, we're going to get on top of this. And mitigation has to be a big part of that.
Did you want to say
I think-
something? Oh, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I was complimenting that. I do believe that we have three things important on that. First, that awareness is not enough. What I expect is that from COP30, we came up with an action plan on all the three topics of the agenda. Let's say mitigation, adaptation, resilience. The other thing is, whatever happens, we have the reality. The climate change is already there. We have to manage this. And this has two sides when you talk about the insurance sector. It has the offer side and the supply side and the demand side. And I come back with the gap of protection that we have in countries like Brazil. You have 85% of people with no insurance of their houses. So there's a long trajectory here for us to create the means for the people to have access to
Can you
insurance.
not use innovation or new sort of technologies to close those gaps?
It comes, that's part of the solution. But I talked about it in my speech about the inclusive products. We have to create also public partnerships with the private sector so that we can build different models and schemes to deal with that. On the supply side, I see that we have a great challenge here in, let's say, pricing the risk, because the models that we used in the past, they are not accurate anymore. So we should not let that aside, because this is a great challenge when we are underwriting risks. If you can understand the risk, so there is a big challenge here. We have to work on that as well. This means developing artificial intelligence models, projection models, developing even the base of those models, which are the climate projection models. We dig into this early, and I discovered, for example, that the models in Brazil are not suitable for insurance use because they are too shorter term or too long terms. We don't have a year, 2 year good climate model. So there is lots of work on that agenda. That's why I'm talking about that we really need to use the COP30 to come up with an action plan on several issues.
Laurence, yeah, please go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And picking up on what Dyogo Oliveira said, we need to bring together different partners. We have to improve the science effectively, because the model to global, we have to really localize the risk very, very precisely. And there are ways, if we really gather forces, and then to make this data and these scenarios available and understandable, of course. And that's totally right. For the moment, the data are just to spread, And again, the horizon are not fit for purpose. So I think it will be a very strong message for COP30 to equip and collectively, in a way, help each other. And again, it's pity that, unfortunately, in US, what the key providers of some of the meteorological and climate data are disappearing. I think the other element you mentioned on this big inequality, the protection gap is really huge. And there, your sector cannot manage that alone. And there are systems where private-public partnership can help because, again, the risk is more distributed, but really focusing on inclusiveness and the capacity to reduce this inequality seems to me really important. Look, for the moment, you look at a country like US, in Florida, find a way, because at a certain point in time, insurance cannot come, then it is a budget of the state which is covering. So there is a massive transfer for public resources to private people. And it has to be balanced with the equality element and inclusiveness of people who can't even have access to this insurance scheme. So it is a big social agenda. And that may be new, that we think not only about only pricing and data, which is anyway a key element, but as well, it is a social contract that we are helping each other, that we are distributing risk among all the society, and certainly globally, because again, in particular developed countries has produced the most emissions, and that has an impact on many developing countries. So there is an element of solidarity which go beyond that. So I'm always really think that this is a key moment, because again, we cannot deny that climate impacts are there. You can play a big role in investing in resilience if, in a way, the system of regulation helps you, and I understand there are questions around that, which I think really interesting issues. And at the same time, resilience, again, when discussing with central bankers, they are very worried about the financial stability. And how, in a way, investing in resilience, not only because we need to do mitigation as well, is a way to limit the big economic risk that can happen because of this element. So I think now the minds can converge again. We have had a period where really nobody was talking to anybody, and that's the moment to stop that.
Okay, well, we have lots of audience questions, so I'm going to start first. I think, Chris, you can take this one. They ask, building on the recently published ECB IOPA paper, do you see merit in an EU public-private reinsurance scheme to increase the insurance coverage for natural catastrophe risk through pooling private risk and perils across the EU?
Yeah, okay, so we've already heard about this, I think, earlier this morning from Thierry, who I think it's fair to say wasn't a fan. So I suppose I'm sort of going to respond to that, and also to his comments as well, which I think are really important, because I think they reflect some of the sort of key issues that some public-private partnerships have run into, which is where they basically monopolize risk, remove the role of the private sector, kind of suppress risk signals to the point at which you're actually just exacerbating those exposure and vulnerability points I was making earlier. So I suppose my first comment would be that I'm a firm believer in, I think, it's been made, the point's been made several times, insurance and reinsurance is premised on diversification, and the ECB IOPA scheme, from what I can understand of the proposal, is absolute, that is the heart of that proposal. I think Thierry's right to warn that it cannot be at the expense or in any way replace the national solutions and indeed the private market that is already doing so much. And then I have read the proposals, and I do think that is a huge consideration that they are aware of. So there's no sense in which those proposals are going to replace what exists at the moment, or replace any of the sort of private market functions with a state or EU level reinsurer. It's simply about introducing a layer over the top to see whether that encourages even more capital, perhaps place some cat bonds, and the point was made by the Commissioner about clarifying that risk ownership. Yep. So if insurers know where their responsibilities begin and where the EU Commission's begin, in terms of like rebuilding, then I think that can only be good. It's a very complex and ambitious proposal, the key thing will be to work out where the national schemes and the market end and the scheme kicks in, and that threshold needs to be dynamic. Broadly, I think it's absolutely worth exploring. There needs to be some technical feasibility studies in behind it, and the pools, the national level pools, so the CCR in France, the CCS in Spain, the NNPP in Norway, all of these pools need to be on board with this. I think the final thing to say on this is that in the conversations that we've been having with these pools and also with countries considering pools, the ECBIO proposals have absolutely accelerated certain conversations at a national level to go, oh, okay, well, would we be able to make use of this scheme if we didn't have one of these solutions? So I think it's very positive. There needs to be the hint of caution that it cannot replace anything that's going on at the moment, and it certainly can't make the mistake of previous partnerships where they have ignored the risk signal, where they've subsidized and distributed so much that they continue to build in risky areas. So I think, very interesting and absolutely worth pursuing.
Okay, Elina, you want to jump in?
Yeah,
there?
I think it's a very valid point, and this risk ownership concept is central to all our work, because also in a situation of natural catastrophe, we have had situations where the protocols have not been clear. So people haven't known who needs to do what and at what point. So working on that risk ownership is super, super important. And as what comes to the EIOPA ECB thinking, we are very interested in it. But aside from technical feasibility, you also need to be aware of political acceptability. Because the risks that different member states experience, the exposure of different member states, it's different. So in that sense, I'd bring in a little bit of realism. We have many, many competing priorities for the next multi-annual financial framework, not least of which is defense. What we're trying to say is that climate risk is actually a defense matter as well, because if your society is hit by extremes, it becomes vulnerable to military aggression. If your railroads are flooded or you can't have access to health services or basic supplies, how are you going to be moving troops around or guaranteeing that they get... So everything is very interconnected, and that interconnectedness has to be borne in mind when developing different preparedness strategies and catastrophe
That's
scenarios.
a really interesting thing you say, because I think, from a general, public perspective, when we see governments, talking about increasing their defense spending budgets, people wonder, what about me? So it's an interesting take that you say that we should think about putting climate into defense as well. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I also think that defense budgets are going to be consistently undermined if nations need to keep responding to uninsured risks and reallocating their budgets away from defense budgets.
Yeah.
If there's lack of insurance. I mean, there's dozens of studies showing that the higher the sort of natural, higher the penetration rate of natural catastrophe insurance in a country, it actually not only does it actually sort of reduce the risk in the first place, when a disaster hits, there's actually a growth spurt because there's the level of economic activity spurred by insurance actually, it is almost sort of positive. So, yeah, yes, the point about different countries bringing different risks to the pool is by far the biggest problem. But insured penetration levels need to go up across the EU in
I
order
agree,
to support
and there you
defence
need
budgets.
to send the right signals, and one of the signals cannot be that no matter what, there will be a backstop at European level.
No.
So I think
I don't
any
think
that
the ECB
kind of
has a
thinking,
backstop.
no,
Yeah.
but any that kind of thinking is dangerous and it's misleading. So people need to accept their share of the risk, but and operate accordingly, because the signals we send guide people's behavior, and that's why the biggest target for me is to change the way our society thinks about climate risk and see it not as only as a threat but also as a opportunity, because if we are more robust and capable of withstanding the risk, we will be better in competing. And there's huge amount of technologies and innovation that can be done to change the kind of risk exposure that we have, not only in data, and I think Laurence is absolutely right. We have so much data everywhere, you know, Copernicus satellites here, there, and everywhere. But is it decision relevant? You know, can we have that data available to consumers and investors in a way that is palatable and accessible, and then really guides the decision? And I think there's some really interesting work ongoing.
I think Elina's point and your point about is there a dichotomy between in a way, climate security and defense? I think we have to go forward. I understand, of course, the defense hardcore people saying you should not greenwash our defense. You see, it's a common discussion. But what is a defense spending? It will be infrastructure, what you say. It will be a lot of industry anyway. And it will be just managing the stability of the system. So I think it's okay, it's normal that it begins like this, but it should stop, because we need really to have a resilient system, including for society, to know how...
And collaborative as well.
And collaborative. And it's just like, I understand, but it's a sort of a past idea that you can separate all these elements of security. Unfortunately, it would be good if it was, you could do only one thing. It will be much more comfortable, much more easy to do. But now it's not possible, because there is so much intertwined. Health issues, for example, that are now really spreading because of the heat waves, and you know that human anyway. Defense is not only about machines. It's about human, and it's about infrastructure. I think how you have grids that function, that are essential to defense, if we don't have a robust infrastructure. Of course, no, it's not possible. And that somehow it's because it's so difficult for the minds of humans just to manage complexities. But it will be good to, that's why risk management, crisis management should be much more involved in our thinking.
Well, Dyogo, there's also a question for you. Someone asks, according to your speech, you said that you asked for zero territory to be left uninsurable in Brazil. So should a global European natcat scheme pursue the same objectives? We all have in our countries areas where climate change makes insurability very unlikely in the short or long term.
Well, the case of Brazil is not yet there. We're still being able to manage the risks in Brazil. We do not have, but I'm very concerned about this, because let's be honest here. It is normal that the insurer prefer to take what we call good risks and not bad risks. That's how the
I think
market
that's human
works.
nature, though.
Yeah, that's how the market works. You know. The problem I see is that with climate change, if you don't take the risk, you will take no risk, because you will be out of the market, because the climate risk will be everywhere. Like, for instance, in Brazil, we have areas that never had droughts in the past, but they do now. Areas that were never flooded, they are now. So this is going to build up, and I do believe that it's so unpredictable what is going to happen in the future, that if an insurer decides right now that they won't take any kind of climate risk, probably they will be out of the market very soon. So this is what I used to say to our associates, that we need to understand this. We need to study profoundly this kind of risks and how this will impact the business now and in the future. So this way we will avoid what we are seeing as insurance deserts.
Well, there's another related question to what you're speaking about, which says, what is necessary then for insurers to invest in nature-based solutions that can lower the impact of catastrophes on society and potentially underwriting, thereby joining public-private forces, in contrast to solely rely on public investment for adaptation?
Well, there is two sides to answer this question. First, we talked a little bit about the investor role of insurance market. So in this role, I see there's room for tunneling money into this kind of nature-based solutions to foster the growth of startups and other business related to that. So this is one role. But the other side of this is how do we provide insurance for those kind of business, which are more risky and sometimes are related to types of risk that are not usually managed by the insurance business. Let's say, for example, we have a project of reforestation. Who is used to provide insurance for this kind of reforestation in that specific zone, that specific area? What are the risks? What are the diseases, the pests that can happen in that zone? So you'll see that there's lots of work to do on that to foster this kind of nature solution-based business and projects.
Okay, well, I'll let you guys close. We have 5 minutes. I think some of the audience perhaps are looking forward to their lunch as well as we are. So I'll leave you all with a final point to make with one question, which is, what is the one action you believe can accelerate natural catastrophe protection? Start with you, Florence.
So I hope, as Dyogo has said, that at COP30 we could make a sort of Paris moment for resilience in Belém. I think if the insurance, the NGOs, the civil society, people who are suffering from climate change can come together and say we have to value this resilience, we have to value the cost saving if we do that, and that really be a big conclusion, I think that will be good. And the second thing is, again, I repeat that, your sector has to speak louder. You will be listened to. So don't be shy to say, look, there is a problem, you can't deny it, let's work together to at least to mitigate these risks.
Okay, Chris?
I'll steal two. I'm going to go with pushing this EC BIOPA to at least understand what would work and what wouldn't. And then just because we've not talked about it so far, I'm going to say that it's so important to bring in other forms of capital that's not just reinsurance capital, and that's where parametric triggers and catastrophe bonds are just going to be, are already flying off the shelf. So I think cat bonds last year about 16 billion, expected to be 3 times that in 10 years' time. All sorts of sort of completely private, but also public-private schemes making use of these. So in Mexico and in Floodry has also just placed a really big cat bond on top of its 3 billion retro markets, because it felt like it's got all it can there. What else can it access? Asset managers. So I think cat bonds and parametric triggers are going to be really important.
Okay, Elina?
Yeah, maybe 3 points. First, I'd say, we need to bring different constituencies together, because no one has a solution, and there is no single solution. So regulator, we don't regulate for ourselves, we regulate for you and the people, and if we don't bring the different viewpoints together, we will not succeed. So you heard it from the Commissioner, my team is very committed. I see many friends in the audience. We talk, so let's keep that up. Second thing, let's be honest about risk ownership. It's not something that can be placed here, there, or everywhere. But every actor in the society has their share to do, and to reduce that risk. So first point is really to reduce. There will always be some residual risk, but we can do so much to minimize it. And the third point is this resilience by design. I would insist on making that one of my key points, and you will see it in all the documents that come from my team, that's for sure. My directorate hasn't changed its name. It's Climate Resilience and Information Management, just as of 1st of June. So times are changing. We will work on making this a different issue with a serious step change. And I look forward to working with everyone on that.
Indeed. Dyogo?
Well, as a final remarks, I really insist that we need an action plan that engages all the actors. Let's say, for our society as a whole, we need to work on prevention, on reducing the protection gap, building a more resilient infrastructure. For the government, I think the government needs to understand that the government itself is under risk because of the impacts of the catastrophes over the budget and over other policies like defense, for example, or education and so on. And for the insurance market, I would say that we really, really need to understand better. I'm sorry.
I guess it really is lunchtime.
Yeah. You know, this is a very changing world. It was expected for the Brazilians to be late, but
Yeah.
now we are not. Well, so just to finish, I was saying that we need to really understand this as insurers. We need to develop models to understand it because this is going to be present on every kind of business the insurance market does. So I would say, as Elina said, that's things that accounts for everyone in the room. So there's lots of work to do.
Yeah, well, you've definitely got a
And
really
finally,
big...
the first of all, everybody is invited to go to Belém and to join us on that. Thank you.
Okay, as long as you're paying for the train tickets, we'll say, or the ship. We won't say plane, since we're talking about the climate. Well, listen, look, it's been a fascinating conversation. So thank you to all of you, to Dyogo, to Elina, to Chris, and Laurence. Thank you for all of your insights. Okay, guys, it's lunchtime.